So after we had finally decided on the style that we were going for, which was inspired by Childish Gambino, as I stated before, we had to do other research in terms of like what the poster should consist of, like what are the conventions that we must follow or we felt that we needed to follow. So from there, one of the research that we done was in terms of slogans. Like we didn't know which slogans to use, so we're kind of like conflicting between like slogans that we had come up with and slogans that we had come up with, but we thought it did not fit quite right. So in order for us to do this, we went onto Google and we typed in online slogan generators, and from that we used Slogans for You, which is an online slogan generator, as it states in the name, and there the website enables you to like type in a keyword, and the website would actually create the slogan for you, and all you have to do is just take the slogan. However, so for instance, we typed in insanity and it would generate a slogan around the word insanity. However, we thought that we used this when we were creating our tickets as well, so that website came into handy, like that website was handy. However, we ended up not using Slogans for You, just simply because like we thought that the slogans that were generated, it did not reflect our narrative as well as we thought it would. So we ended up coming up with our own slogan. In terms of the review, which appears on the poster, we also went on to we also went on Google and we typed in like poster reviews, and from there it enables you to see like example of like what the reviews would say on the poster. So although we created our own one, it was the starting point for us to like have an idea of like the language used and how to set it out. So we ended up using Google became a really important aspect for us when we were planning out both our poster as well as the magazine. In terms of the illusion of Flora being ripped, which was what our poster first looked like when I had created it. So I had her like ripped, give the illusion that she was ripped in half, and in order for me to get a sense of like how to create this sort of like disfigurement, which is consistent within the horror genre. For example, in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface is disfigured. So I used a website called allposters.com, which is basically a website which enables you to like create distorted images. So like on our website, it gives you ideas as to how to create something different, so something in terms of like reflecting the horror genre, however something that you wouldn't normally see on like posters. Say for instance romantic ones, you wouldn't normally see that. So on this website, for example, it teaches you like it gives you example of how to place like a crack going across a person's face, or scars going across them, something that looks completely different, something out of the norm, which the horror genre tend to use. So I use that in creating the illusion of Flora being like ripped. Like it gave me the idea of how I could create it, although I had done it in Photoshop, but it gave me the idea of how I could create it successfully. Also in terms of planning, I had to look at in terms of the poster, I had to look at the setting, like, so how the credits are set out. So in order for me to look at like the style of like the fonts used, I went on to 101fonts.com. so from there I was able to gain an insight as to the sort of fonts that are used in creating credits, sorry. However, I ended up not using this. I ended up using the font, just simply because from 101 fonts, like you couldn't always put in the words that you wanted, so you couldn't freely type in, let's say, the producer's name. You had to use that template, like you could not type any other thing besides the words that were already present within that particular credit. So I ended up using that. And then in terms of in terms of planning out the shot, I ended up looking on Google Images again, just to look at the sort of shots that are used on posters, like the angle, as well as like how, like the rule of third. I had to look into what that was. I had to research into what the rule of third was before I actually used it in Photoshop, because before I've heard of it, but I had never used it, so therefore I weren't sure as to how to use the rule of third. So I ended up going on Google and typing in rule of third, and then from there I came across various websites which were like showed you tutorials on how to use it and their aims and how you could achieve it effectively. In terms of the crack, I had to do a lot of research in terms of how we could make the crack come across effectively, like as in the crack going through Flora, because we ended up not using the illusion of her being ripped due to the audience feedback. So from there, I used Weed Graphics, which is basically again an online source which allows you to which teaches you how to create a crack in Photoshop. So I thought that was really good in terms of the research. So already when it came to doing the crack, me and Chloe had a sense of like how we could create it effectively. So yeah, in terms of the poster overall, in terms of the research, a lot of research had to go into, for example, like the rating which appears. Like we weren't sure, like we needed to know how the logo looks like, and the different ratings that were out there. So in terms of the research, that came into handy. So overall, we ended up using Google a lot in terms of like planning out the poster.